Good afternoon, anti-novelists and friends. Welcome back to Zettelkasten for Fiction Writers, where imagination finds order. So, first thing to note, my boo-boo is healing nicely. I will not pick fights with cans of beans ever again, I promise. So, here we go. Yesterday, I left you off at incorporating cards and ideas into the plot box. I have a couple of really great questions that I want to address that dovetail right into this very issue, whatever you want to call it. So here we go. First of all, how do you make decisions about what's going to happen in your story and incorporate that into your plot box? Well, let's take a step back and let's revisit something I include in chapter 3 on plot modeling. I refer to several authors and model makers, both computer modeling and actual modeling, and I walk you through ways of using modeling to think of your story like a systems thinker. I won't go too deep into that. I will just give you the important piece for what we're talking about here, which is building your story out in your plot box so you can get it written. In this card, I've made myself a note that a story model depicts what happens as a character pursues a goal, and be clear that only goals that play a significant role in the story get modeled unless you're doing a free write. If you're doing a free write or you're just drafting out possibilities, then you want to include everything but the kitchen sink so you have it all saved on the page or the note card. That's what we're going to do. So let's return to our sweet fisherman. We need to give him a name. I haven't given him a name yet, but he's just our sweet fisherman. Let's look at what could happen as a result of what we discovered yesterday. I've already started a card. Remember what we discovered yesterday, which is he goes up to the lake and he has this experience and he comes back and he tells his so-called friend and discovers that friend is kind of a jerk? Well, what might it look like as we plot out or play out what happens as a result of that? So we have this blue X, and that blue X marks our fisherman telling his tale to his so-called friend. Now, from there, we'll keep this simple, but you can make this as complex and as big as you want. Sometimes I use a big sheet of 11 by 17 calendar or blotter paper, and I draw the whole thing out so I can see my story. It just helps me figure things out, but I'll keep it small for this exercise. So here's our guy. So he tells his so-called friend about his experience going up to the lake and catching his fish. From there, he's got two options. Option one is, I'm just going to put a plus. It's a positive outcome. Let's say he connects with his friend. Maybe they share a moment and they bond. Okay? So that would be a positive outcome to this event, this scene that's happened in our story. But, what if it's a negative outcome? That's what we talked about yesterday, remember? His friend is dismissive and says, oh, I went to the factory farm and I bought a big fish. Big deal, whatever. Okay, so he's dismissive. Let's say he's condescending. And just for good measure, we will mark down that he is outright mean, okay? So that gives you your two options. This is your scene. The scene is the event at the lake and what transpires. There's a positive outcome. There's a negative outcome. We're going with the negative outcome for our story, all right? So I've already labeled this 9015 because as you recall from yesterday's episode, that is the place in my plot box where I have parked this card. And when I say yesterday's episode, I mean episode 3, part 2. So let's go back here. And what do we find in my plot box? There's a Post-it note. That Post-it note has been attached to this little packet of stuff, right? So as I'm working on this story, I'm leaving myself markers. Oh, oops, oh, earthquake. Just kidding. I'm leaving myself markers along the way that remind me of what I'm thinking about. So let's pull that little packet that's clipped together out of the 2015 spot, and let's see what it means. Well, first of all, because I'm telling myself to plot model it, I've just done that. Now, I could go many different ways with these outcomes. Maybe he tells the story to somebody else. Maybe something else happens. You know, this could go a jillion different ways, but I'm keeping it simple just to show you how it works. So I've completed drawing out my plot model. So I'm just going to stick that on the back because that piece is done. And I know I'm going to go with the negative outcome. Okay. So this tells me the direction that my story is going to go. I know what scene I need to write next. I need to process this sharing his story at the lake scene and what happened subsequently. Well, let's see what I have clipped here. Well, I've got a couple of things. The first thing that I have clipped to his reaction, right? He's sad and baffled, and he realizes this person is not a real friend. Now, there's two ways this realization can happen. It can happen what we call off book, which means your reader does not see this realization take place on the page. There's no monologue, there's no working it through. It just jumps to, in story time, his realization and then his subsequent actions as a result of it. But what I've added here, I've added a VITZ card. Remember, VITZ, variations in the Zettelkasten. This tells me that in this scene, I want to do something here. And I know the one I've chosen is right here. Discovering an inner or an outer goal. That could also be an inner or an outer reality. That's why I clipped this card, this VITZ card, to this story card. Because I wanted to remind myself that he needs to make some kind of a discovery. All right? Well, how's he going to do that? Note I've also clipped this card. This is what we would consider a proper main card, okay? So you know that a main card is something that is a story element that you want to include in the scene where you've placed that card in the plot box. Well, what does that mean for us? Let's go over here. You'll notice I have pulled my Sibley Field Guide to Birds of Eastern North America. And if you look in that book, what do we find? It is a proper bib card. Check it out. So I've got Sibley, David Allen is my author. I've got the Sibley Field Guide to Birds of Eastern North America is my title. I've got my publisher, my pub date, and then I have a note at the bottom, setting at the lake for fishing trip, Golden Eagle. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling myself in this card, I want to include something about this in that scene. That's why, oopsie, this card, my main card, was clipped there. Now, if I flip this bib card, it's my bibliography card that I keep in the book I'm working in. If I flip it over, I see on page 110, I've got the word Golden Eagle reminding me that that's where I found that information. And I've made a note, family sign. Okay, so I'm leaving myself a breadcrumb trail about how I might want to use that information in my story. And then on page 111, I've made a note about there's the bald eagle for that entry. So this bib card is reminding me that this has relevance in my story. Okay, so I'm going to put that back in there, leave that in my book, and I'm going to go over then to the main card. So as I'm reading my Sibley's Guide and I'm reviewing the history, I'm reviewing the traits of the golden eagle, the bald eagle, I'm just letting my mind free wander. And if I'm being honest, I also asked my daughter to do some free wandering and some brainstorming with me. So here's what we came up with. I've already penciled in this card is 9015 because I know that's the scene, right? My guy's at the lake. He's making this discovery about this person that's not his friend. So he's at the lake. This is setting up the scene that will follow. So on our plot model card, if my character begins here, which is at the betrayal, this is the moment when his mean friend does the mean thing and we decide to go with that choice. Where I am at on this model is what you would call in self-defense, as some of you know, I used to own a self-defense training company, you would call this being left of the bang, okay? The bang is this reaction from his so-called friend. What I'm looking at when I'm pulling this golden eagle card and sticking it along with my lake scene is I'm looking at what leads up to this defining moment. Well, it's a golden eagle. So we already know that he's taken this fishing trip. He has his motivations of, reconnecting with his long lost father, facing his fears, etc., and so forth. But let's look at what I've jotted on this golden eagle card that I created after I read my Sibley's Guide. What have I got? I've got potentially a family story, right? That corresponds to what I put on the back of my bib card. I reminded myself it could be a family thing. What if he sees a golden eagle and it signifies character growth or some kind of flight or freedom? Okay, that's good, but that still doesn't dial in what I'm getting at with this scene. So let me keep going through my brainstorming. What about the eagle eye? Does that relate to the evil eye? No, this isn't that story either. Facing your fears. Okay, we know that he has a fear of water, so that's important. What about an eagle as a predator? Bingo. Did you feel that? A predator. What do we know about this person? This person is a meanie, not a good person, potentially preying on our sweet fisherman. So having him encounter this moment with a golden eagle and potentially have these thoughts about his family story, about the eagle being predatory, if I write this scene properly, it's going to set up in my reader's mind that my sweet character is going to come to this conclusion. I have a final note, which is that of stepping into your power. Did you feel that? Again, that sets the reader up for this revelation that's going to come as a result of sharing his experience with his so-called friend. So by putting my golden eagle card together with my reminder to Vitz that I want to experiment with him discovering something, some part of his inner world, and setting this up as the pre-event to his telling his so-called friend these details, if I write this correctly, I have totally nailed setting up my reader's expectations, making sure that I pay off those expectations with him coming to this recognition that this person is in fact not a friend. He steps into his own power as a result of this scene, and he recognizes that this person is a predator and does not have his best interests at heart, and he can move on down through the story with this newly earned bit of wisdom. So all of those items now, beginning with his reaction, my golden eagle card, and my little plot model that reminds me how I got there, along with my Vitz card, these all now go under 9015. So let's say I just did this pre-writing, exactly what we've just done here just now. I'm going to tuck that in behind my 7015, which if you're following in the plot box, you know that that's the second battle. The opposition or the antagonistic force has revealed itself. So now we know this so-called friend is that force, and we know that in this scene, our sweet fisherman is going to come to that realization. If I don't have time to write this scene right now, just by parking that pre-writing work in that spot in the plot box, I have all of those details for safekeeping. I can marinate on it. I can maybe think about it as I'm taking a walk, doing whatever. Let that story develop in my mind. And at some point, if I'm not ready to write it now, I'm going to sit down and all of that is going to gel for me. And I'm going to pull out those cards. I'm going to remember what I want that scene to look like. I can sit down with my book, which is over here. Dun, da, da, da. And this is just some short notes that I've started. But I can sit down in my writing book and I can draft out that scene. Let it marinate. And then when I'm ready, I can type it into my Scrivener and develop it as the second battle part of my book, of my story. See how that works? That, my friends, is how you use a plot model. You use gathering your nonfiction resources, and you use processing all of that using the Zettelkasten method into your plot box so that you can get your writing done. That's how it works, guys. So you're getting 2 bonus videos this week because you guys are just awesome. So I am compelled to keep answering your questions because you keep on asking them. So that is that. I will leave you there for today. That takes you pretty much through a whole overview of using the plot box and getting the writing done. We will continue on down the road later in the week. I like to generally post videos on Thursdays or Fridays. So hopefully you will get yet another installment this week where we will move on to theme, which I write about in chapter 8. And we will move a little bit into scene transitions, which I write about in chapters 7 and a little bit in chapter 11, because transitioning between scenes is the next step of implementing the details into your plot box so that you can get them into your story. So we're going to talk about that. But as I said, I will leave you there for today. I thank you all for your amazing questions and for all of your thumbs up and your subscriptions. VictoriaCrowder.com is where you can drop me an email so that you can be notified as soon as the Zettelkasten for Fiction Writers book is ready to launch. We're just a few months out now from launch, but I will keep sharing as long as you keep asking questions. So as always, thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you in the next video.